It's time now for Countywide, a special presentation of Yavapai Broadcasting News. Join Paul David and Kyle Benedict as they talk with our community's leaders, newsmakers, and people in the know. You'll hear about the hot topics that affect all our lives in Yavapai County. And now here's today's Countywide.
Welcome to Countywide. I'm Paul David. As always, it's great to have you in studio with us today. Pete Gordon from the Prescott National Forest. He's their fire staff officer. He's here today to talk about current conditions in the Prescott National Forest. Tuesday, we had Vic Morfin from Coconino National Forest. Pete, you're up to bat.
All right.
How you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Excellent, excellent. Let's get right into it. We've had several wildfires over the last week now. It seemed like this last weekend kind of was the trigger for things to start happening. So I'm going to ask you the same thing I asked Vic. Are we in wildfire season?
Absolutely. Certainly the recent rains, this weekend are going to moderate things for us. But it's safe to say that in the Southwest and anywhere in Arizona, there's fire season year-round, depending on how dry and how warm it is of the day. But we can always rely on a summer fire season just about anywhere. The length and the severity certainly depends on our winter and spring moisture and amount of wind and things like that. But we're definitely in fire season for sure, but things are moderating to our relief.
But from now until monsoon, even past monsoon, now through the end of summer and into the fall, we need to be extremely diligent with our fire.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the thing to really think about is what are the conditions on a daily basis. You know, the fire managers and our firefighters are going to monitor the trends, and that'll help dictate overall fire behavior. But the ability, or the availability to have a fire any day is a daily thing. It depends on how warm it is, where that fire might be, if it's in our grass fuels or the lighter, smaller diameter stuff. It only takes a few hours period to dry those things out. You put a little wind behind that and you could have a fire on any given day. The severity of that fire or the energy released out of that fire, that may vary on a more weekly or monthly basis, but we're in it, and while it might be cloudy and a little humid today, 3 or 4 days from now, all we need is a day of sunlight and a little bit of wind, and our grass.
It dries it out fast.
Absolutely.
Okay,
yeah.
we heard that on Tuesday as well, that wind will just take that moisture right back.
Probably our biggest nemesis when we have a fire, but also leading up to and changing the conditions rapidly. When you have wind, it accelerates the drying of the fuels.
If we look back this year, we've had just about, I think, every kind of fire. I mean, Kyle Benedict has been extremely busy in the newsroom with the local fire agencies because we've had target shooting fires, grinder fires, welding fires. This week we've had 2 instances now of kids playing with lighters. One resulted in a house burning down the village of Oak Creek, and then one at Granite Creek Park over in Prescott Valley. So we've just had people burning brush in their yard, and it gets away and runs up a hillside. So we've had just about every kind of fire we could think of, including you guys this week had the Cleater fire.
Yes.
So what's the story behind the Cleater fire?
As usual, it's really hard for us to pinpoint and say definitively the cause. We suspect recreational shooting on that one. Certainly was not lightning. We've only had 1 lightning fire this year so far, and that was a month and a half ago. We had a band of storms similar to this that had lightning. So certainly a human caused fire. I can say that definitively. This was a human caused fire, the one south of Cleater. But it's really hard to pinpoint the evidence. But there was an indication that it was target shooting. A metal target had been placed out there where the origin of the fire was. Very easy for us to determine the origin, where a fire starts geographically. And there was a metal target out there with evidence of being shot recently. And that's all we have to go on. Our law enforcement is doing the investigation as usual. But nonetheless, we know we have had target shooting related fires. So
I think it might be hard for people to wrap their head around that. Yeah. Target shooting. You just don't think of something like that starting a fire because it's just a ricochet bullet. But I mean, it's literally a spark.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I mean, that's how dangerous it can be.
Yeah,
it's amazing.
And it's really just a matter of common sense. Unless posted, it's not illegal to shoot recreationally on the forest. It is illegal to use exploding targets. Or any incendiary device. I know you and I have talked about fireworks in the past, and those are always illegal on national forests. But it really just boils down to common sense. If you're going to spend the weekend target shooting or sighting in a rifle for hunting season, pick the location strategically. Just think about it a little bit before you get started. Look for grounds free and clear of grass and brush. Look for that dirt backstop, or and don't do it on a windy day. And do think about it as it's a spark. When metal hits metal, or metal hits a rock, or a fragmented bullet that is hot, that heat transfers to grass on a good warm day, and it's not unlikely or not impossible to start a fire just from the radiant heat.
That's
or excuse me, the conductive heat.
Right, yeah, just a fragment of a hot bullet. Well, I guess we talk about that. Don't park your car.
Exactly.
Your hot engine over tall grasses, because it'll do the same thing.
Yep.
So that day was windy. I mean, it has been windy over the last few days, and it's going to be windy over the next few days as well. Granted, we've got some clouds and some moisture coming in and stuff like that, so that's always a huge plus. But those winds, you guys jump on it right away?
We did.
Yeah.
So a couple things I can say about that fire and some of the success. First attributed, we held the fire to 141 acres, and it's 50% contained within that 24-hour period, and now I'm sure we're calling it 100% contained at this point. First of all was the success of our firefighters and our initial attack ICs for making the call on how best to go about it without exposing our firefighters unnecessarily to some pretty tough country. They figured out a good strategy the first evening to contain the eastern flank so it wouldn't come across the grass towards Cleator, and then they spent the next windy day figuring out how to corral it up to the west and uphill into the wilderness. Actually, it's in the Castle Creek Wilderness. But we took a little luck that day for sure. The fact that we had higher humidities with those winds, cloud cover with those winds, not a whole lot of precip, if any, occurred on that fire. But our humidity certainly came up, and then the shading of the sun by the clouds certainly helped. And then I think the fact that it was at the base of the mountain, there was probably some wind sheltering just because of the broken steep topography. It wasn't exposed to that direct higher wind that just a mile or two to the east in the flat country, winds were probably a lot higher and would have been a different story probably.
It's got to be kind of a nightmare to hear you've got a fire and knowing that there's 40-mile-an-hour wind gusts going on outside. What's going through your head when you hear those two things together? Well,
we start thinking ahead, literally. We start thinking about worst-case scenarios, and we actually did that on Monday. Monday we geared up first thing in the morning fairly early, looking at what the available resources were, aircraft, other crews, and then we rallied around some of the decision making that needed to be done with size of an organization, should it get bigger, priority values out ahead of the fire, and building all the decision support that goes behind that. So we geared up, assuming that this fire might have several hundred, if not 1,000 acres with that condition, and those lighter fuels. They move fast. So that's what goes through our head as we try to jump out, thinking ahead that it's a lot of potential. We would be remiss if we didn't.
Okay, all right, let's take our first break. Prescott National Forest Fire Staff Officer Pete Gordon in studio today. This is Countywide. We'll take a quick 2-minute break. We'll be right back.
You've known for years that this is the #1 cause of lung cancer, smoking. That's why the Surgeon General issued this warning. But do you know the #1 cause of lung cancer for non-smokers? It's in this room. You can't see it or smell it. It's radon. Radon is an invisible radioactive gas that seeps inside your home from underground. It can build up to dangerous levels without notice. Now the Surgeon General has issued another lung cancer warning. And whether you smoke or not, breathing radon can cause lung cancer. That's why you need to have your home tested. Protect your family. Call 1-800-SOS-RADON. Heed the warning. Have your home tested, because radon problems can be fixed.
Oh, look, a redhead. Staring contest. You still got it. I know.
Come alive with the forest.
The dad was cute.
You were looking right at us.
Visit discovertheforest.org to find a forest near you.
Hey, look, it's those guys.
Get some drinks!
Are you good to drive?
I'm fine.
How many did you have?
I should be fine.
You should be.
Go and step out of the vehicle for me.
See ya, buddy. Good luck. So turns out, buzz driving and drunk driving, they're the same thing, and it costs around $10,000. So not worth it.
Welcome back to Countywide. Prescott National Forest Fire Staff Officer Pete Gordon in studio with us today. Let me ask you this. How do you approach a wildfire?
Well, and I guess the way I'd like to answer that is talk about more of a sort of a frame of mind and so the pre-attack work that we do. We could certainly talk all day about approaching a fire tactically and the options we have. But one of the things that we're trying to philosophically, I guess, on the Prescott National Forest is look at the two initial phases, or the first two steps to initial attacking a wildfire starts long before we get tactical. And that's two steps. The first step is fuels management. And the idea there is we're looking at and then we treat areas that we're most likely to ask firefighters to make a stand or to engage a wildfire, and that, you know, like around our values at risk and likely to be the urban interface. So we've first step is to plan for and then start implementing fuels reduction projects, whether it's mastication in our brush, thinning, prescribed burning. Not only is that protection for those values, but it's protection for the firefighters. Where can we give them the tactical advantage? Where can we give them the highest probability of success? That is a step to initial attacking a wildfire. It's not just rushing headlong with a fire hose and a shovel. Unfortunately, we've seen some pretty bad outcomes when firefighters have gone into places that were not likely to succeed. Mm-hmm. The second step is very simply prevention and education. And that's not only internal to us, educating ourselves on conditions and new tactics and understanding changes in our fuels, but public education. You and I have talked about prevention many times.
Oh, yeah.
And we all have a part as a homeowner. I'm a homeowner in the interface. We have a responsibility to help firefighters get that advantage. It's a simple thing we've talked about for decades of defensible space, Firewise programs. We need to be doing that, and it rolls right back into step one, which is fuels mitigation. Take care of your own property. Learn why you need to take care of your property. For recreating on the forest, understand the conditions. We were just talking about shooting, and when the conditions are, we can and can't have a campfire. So that's been our approach. Long before we put a shovel or a fire hose out on a fire, it's step one, fuels mitigation. Step two, prevention and education.
Let me ask you this. What are the current conditions on the Prescott National Forest? The
current conditions are, they've moderated. We are about the average over the last 10 years of data. And when that's sort of a broad stroke approach. We look at several indices, as we've talked about over the years, but when we look at both our live fuel moistures, the larger dead fuel moistures, the amount of moisture content in the logs and the live chaparral, those were way ahead. The 1st of April, we were about a month ahead and getting a little nervous, much like 2014 when we went into restrictions, the earliest we've ever done it. A lot of these indices were trending a month ahead. So now with the last
Meaning wildfire season was a month early.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and conditions were a little more, more volatile than on average for April. We've moderated. The last couple of rain events have been enough widespread that things have moderated back to average, if that makes sense. Now our average has changed over the last couple decades with drought, and as we talked before the break, it's always fire season, but we are far better off now than we were 3.5 weeks ago.
Okay, and that could change 3.5 weeks from now.
Yeah, it could change within a week. If no more moisture comes and we get these wind events we were talking about, it'll easily and quickly turn around, depending on wind and temperature and lack of rain.
Now, winter months, you guys are really big about getting out there and doing some burning, and you were just talking about that with, you know, giving your firefighters the best chance of locations where they could fight a fire. How did that go this winter? Were you able to get a lot of work done because the strong El Nino ricocheted off that high pressure over the state and sent it all up north, so it was a little drier than a lot drier than we thought it was going to be.
Yeah. The Prescott National Forest has been really successful, and I really owe that to all the folks that work in my program doing fuels management work, which happens to be the same folks that are doing the firefighting. We've been very successful in the last couple of years competing internally for additional funds. The Forest Service at the national and regional level every year has an opportunity. Some of them are special emphasis projects, others is just supplemental funds available in our regular accounts. But we've been very successful securing money, by demonstrating the need, number one, and articulating well where we can strategically do the best work for the value of the taxpayer dollar. We've done well, and that has translated in the last couple of years of several thousand, 5,000 to 10,000 additional acres a year of mostly mechanical treatment, mastication, pre-commercial thinning out the thicker trees back to a more normal stock level or a historical level. And then our prescribed burning program has been successful. That obviously is probably the most variable. We have to be very careful with staying within prescription and finding the right conditions to do it. We're also very sensitive that folks in the communities are sensitive to the smoke. So that's a much more precise tool with a little bit more limitations on it than doing some of the mechanical, all of which certainly there are limitations. We have to stay within the environmental analysis, but we've been very successful. I think I've repeated that maybe too many times, but we're in about as good a shape as we could be, but it's going to be constant work. There's a maintenance element to this too over the coming years. Are there any areas that you see right now that you would look at and say, wow, this should be a top priority for us right in this area? This area is pretty good right now. Yeah, and I can share some good news about a priority area. One of the areas on the Prescott National Forest, as you look from east to west, the Verde Valley side all the way west to the areas west of Prescott, west of Ground King, it is the southwest corner of the forest that I think is a priority. We have not, it's difficult country to get to. This is the Hassayampa River drain, or the Hassayampa watershed. It's difficult access. It's predominantly chaparral and pine at the higher elevations. And one of our problems has been is the available analysis done to give us ability to go do work. In other words, NEPA, the Environmental Policy Act, the ability to go in and implement projects has been limited because we didn't have any current analysis, and now that is underway. We started about 6 months ago, again with additional funding that we were able to compete for and demonstrate a need. And we've got an internal organization of the Forest Service that specializes in doing large-scale environmental analysis. And we expect within the next couple of years, around 2018, the line officer would sign a decision notice approving the analysis that's been done. That'll tell us what are the available treatments, whether it's prescribed burning, mastication, and even small-scale stuff, protecting watersheds and springs and things like that. Wow, 2 years to take to do that done, though. We got to take another break. I know. Prescott National Forest Fire Staff Officer Pete Gordon in studio today. This is Countywide. We'll be back in just a couple minutes.
Me and my boy Matt had it good. He had catnip that was off the hook. But one day, he brings a girl home, and she's allergic to cats. Every sneeze was a nail in my coffin. Now I'm in a shelter. It's decent, but they don't even have Wi-Fi.
I'm Jenny Garth, and as a mother of 3, I know kids worry about a lot of things. Getting enough food to eat shouldn't be one of them. But here in America, that is a real worry for 1 in 5 children. Even though we are one of the most food-rich countries in the world, 15 million children don't know where their next meal is coming from. This is unacceptable, and something the Feeding America nationwide network of food banks is working to solve. Instead of accepting that our country lets billions of pounds of surplus food go to waste every year, Feeding America has made it their mission to help families in need by rescuing this food. Through food pantries and meal programs, the nationwide network of food banks provides more than 3 billion meals, serving virtually every community in the United States, including yours. Join me in supporting Feeding America and your local food bank by visiting feedingamerica.org. Together, we can solve hunger. Together, we're Feeding America.
Welcome back to Countywide. Just a couple minutes left in the program. We finished our show up with Vic Morphin from Coconino National Forest the same way. And how is the Prescott National Forest doing with the banning campfires?
Unfortunately, it's steady business. It's something that we can always count on. I suppose I could report good news. We haven't had any abandoned campfires that have escaped any significance causing a statistical wildfire. But it's fairly steady business over the weekend and into Mondays for our not only our fire patrol folks, prevention folks, but our field-going recreation folks. Fairly regular business as they check the campsites, the dispersed sites. They'll call in and we'll have to come help put a little water on something that was still hot.
It's going to be a little bit of rage when you find those burning out there like that, just all by themselves.
Yeah, we talked common sense a few times today and in past shows. And that's really what it boils down to. It's, we all understand and we personally take part in enjoying campfires when we're out camping. It's part of the experience. Just ask for a little common sense that when you're ready to leave, or if you're going to leave for a little while and come back, put it out. Keep it of appropriate size. Make sure it's cleared around where you want to put the campfire. If there's an existing ring, please use it. And then put it out. Bring extra water to do that, and don't just put water in it and don't just bury it, but put water on it and try to stir it up. Bring a camp shovel, use a large stick if you have to, but mix your water into those hot coals and make sure there's no heat coming off of it before you leave.
You always know it was put out right when you pull up to the campsite and that ring's got this mound of dirt sitting on top of it. It's like, okay, whoever was here last did that fine, and then I should have a shovel and a hard rake with me anyways, which I do. I take a shovel so I could scoop that out.
Yep.
I got a hard rake to clear around the ring. I got 5 gallons of water. And I'm ready to take care of that campfire if need be, you know. And then you put it out when you're done with it. You put it out. And then I think another thing we should probably make a point of is we're talking 30 and 40 mile an hour winds, and typically that runs from about 11 o'clock until just as the sun goes down. So maybe that's when I should build my campfire. No,
exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, so we shouldn't have our campfires at the windiest part of the day as well. So those are pretty common sense things.
Yep. And speaking of those hours of the day where there's wind, keep that in mind. If you're having a campfire early morning to warm up, keep that in mind. That if you're going to go out hiking or sightseeing for the day, expect that normally we see breezy conditions in the summer anyway. It's just part of the normal pattern. As the high sets up, we get a southwest wind flow. So just anticipate that, and if you're going to take off for a little while in the morning, put that thing out. I know you're going to have to start it up again later in the afternoon or evening, but
that's part of that camping experience.
And it's far better than the alternative of an escape campfire.
Whew, boy, is it ever. Pete Gordon, great. Thanks for coming in.
My pleasure.
Great to see you again.
You too.
That is today's Countywide. Thank you so much for watching and listening, and we will talk to you again next time.